Well, we have heard a whole lot about Obamacare for obvious reasons, and it'll be interesting to see the weeks ahead what happens with the Affordable Care Act, considering there's now new leadership there will be in the White House. But the fact is that at the state level, there are many things, many pieces of legislation and rules and regulations that also affect health care greatly. And we wanted to invite our good friend Matt Bales to come and talk to us about that. He's going to give us a sense of all of this state-based legislation that actually requires our state's businesses and individuals to pay more for health insurance coverage because these things force insurance companies to pay for extra benefits. Now, Matt has quite an interesting resume, as do all of our speakers each week. Take a listen to what he has been doing over the years before he came to this new organization called the North Carolina Coalition for Fiscal Health. Matt served as Deputy Finance Director for Senator Elizabeth Dole's campaign in 2008. He's worked on a number of other winning campaigns for state legislature. He was the Political and New Media Director at Cornerstone Solutions, working with campaigns. He was also the Research Director at the North Carolina Free Enterprise Foundation. Of course, Joe Stewart, head of that organization, is with us today. So now Matt is with this new organization focused on the healthcare, health insurance, and fiscal health in our state. So please welcome our good friend, Matt Bales.
Thanks. Thanks for inviting me, Donna. Want to start out, we talk about tax climate, we talk about regulatory climate in North Carolina. We've done a lot of positive things. You know, Governor McCrory's campaign was really founded in the Carolina comeback. But one thing we don't talk about is how much it costs to have health care in North Carolina. And that's something that, you know, if we are moving the needle in a positive direction on regulatory climate and tax climate, why aren't we focusing on the cost of health care in North Carolina? And so what I'm here to talk about is what is a mandate and how it happens. So the ACA is the law of the land for the time being, but above and beyond the ACA are a lot of state-based mandates. Those are only in North Carolina, and they apply to only your health insurance if you're an individual or your employer, a small group plan, provides your health insurance for you. It doesn't apply to state health or the state employees, so that's an interesting fact that our General Assembly is passing some mandates that only apply to the small business and the individual community, but leaving off all the state employees, all the Medicare recipients that would fall under some of these supplemental plans. So that's one thing we're here to talk about, but also what is the economic detriment of a mandate? It's taking money out of your wallet, your hard-earned money, and giving it to a health insurance company to pay for a benefit that only a small portion of the population will probably even use. How many of you have ever been to a pastoral counselor? Show of hands. Okay, well, you're paying for that every month in your health insurance. And so let's dive in. My team put together a small little GIF that kind of gives you a little top-line overview of what we're talking about. So we're trying to raise awareness about this issue, and we're not, trying to pressure people. We're not going back and filing legislation. What we're trying to do is raise awareness, and give people like you in this room the tools necessary to contact your legislator, because it's not a very fun or sexy issue. A lot of times we are taking the economic issue to the legislators, and we are fighting against organizations that are either have patience or a very emotional and compelling sometimes argument. And so I would always rather have the emotional issue, but unfortunately I'm hired and I take the economic issue. But what we're trying to do is raise awareness about the issue. And so These are, again, above and beyond what is in the ACA. The ACA laid out what's called essential health benefits. That's what everybody must have in their plan. It must be covered, otherwise the federal government will do something probably pretty bad to you as an insurance company. But these are just, in North Carolina, ones that go above and beyond. And again, mandate is not something that everyone will use at all times, or you may never use it, but you're going to be paying for it every single month. And unfortunately, these mandates are targeting small businesses and individuals who pay for their own health insurance. So these are not people who fall into the Medicaid category and get their subsidies. These are not the really, really big companies that have very generous plans. These are the small, or these are the economic engines of North Carolina that are paying for these mandates out of their pocket. And so when you're paying for these mandates, you're taking money out of things that could spur economic development, whether it's giving pay raises, investing in new equipment, but also you're doing it for something you'll probably never use in many situations. On the screen are a list of mandates that go above and beyond the ACA in North Carolina. Just a fun fact, North Carolina has 57 mandates. We are the second highest in the Southeast, which includes Florida. We are in the top 10 in the entire U.S. That's not a top 10 list that North Carolina should be on. You know, it's great when we are in the top 10 of Site Selection Magazine and all those economic development, but if they started using metrics and looking at mandates, I'm having a feeling we would fall down the list. And so you can take a look on the screen and you can see some of the things you're paying for out of your pocket each month that you might never use. I mean, a podiatrist, I mean, yeah, if I go to a podiatrist, I should pay for that. That's a special thing. You shouldn't be forcing people to pay for that every single month. But you look at the total costs. These are based on actual members in North Carolina that are paying their premiums into this select category of what the mandates would impact. You have $218 million being taken out of the paychecks and out of the wallets of small business owners and individuals going to insurance companies to cover things that you may or may not ever use. But let's look at a larger picture. What we've done is, after we figure out the cost of each mandate per year, we go back to when it was passed by the General Assembly, and we put that tag on it. That's $7.4 billion in economic loss just for these mandates. And a lot of these mandates are only covered in a handful of other states, some not even in other states. For example, pastoral counselors, that's one of the best examples. Only 2 other states cover it, but we are happy to cover it here in North Carolina. And it's relatively small usage. So what you're seeing is, again, very few people use it, but we're all paying for it. So who pushes these mandates? As I said earlier, a lot of times they're emotional arguments, and they come from special interest groups. Does anyone remember former Speaker Jim Black? Does anyone remember his story of how he ended up in a nice wrought iron facility? It was because of a chiropractic bill. It was a chiropractic mandate bill, to be specific. Well, guess what? That bill keeps coming back and back and back. And I firmly believe that it will come back yet again in 2017. But these are special interest groups that these chiropractors want to be paid the same as your regular doctor, let alone that they maybe don't have the same amount of training, but they don't want you necessarily to pay for it. They want to force the insurance companies to pay for it. Well, the insurance companies are just going to pass along the cost to their customers. But for example, what if I ran a physical therapy shop? I would be sworn against going to a chiropractor because they are naturally aligned against each other. Why should I, being the guy who runs the physical therapy shop, being forced to pay for something that my employees will never use because they're going to come to me as a physical therapist and not the chiropractor? But that's what a mandate does. It forces me as the physical therapist shop owner to pay for something for my employees that they will probably never use. And that's the same thing we're dealing with on the General Assembly. They take a variety of different looks and aspects when they come up in legislation, but a lot of times there's special interest groups behind them that push these because there's a benefit to them. And that benefit comes to them at the cost of all of your hard-earned money. So the North Carolina Coalition for Fiscal Health came about in May of this year. Our goal is singularly focused. we focused only on health benefit mandates. You know, there is a large swath of things in the healthcare space from a legislative regulatory standpoint that we could focus on, but in order to achieve our goals, we only focus on the singular issue of health benefit mandates in North Carolina. I will not be going to DC to help the president-elect decide what to do with the ACA. That is out of my league. I will not be going or getting involved in Raleigh on other issues that this or the John Locke Foundation might care about, like certificate of need. Those are not in our wheelhouse. Our wheelhouse is only mandates. We are here to provide small businesses and individuals across North Carolina that are concerned about their fiscal health, the tools and the advocacy platform necessary to contact and communicate with your legislator to say no on mandates. So we started this project in May 12th of 2016, and what we're doing is we're just having a conversation right now. We don't know what the issues of 2017 are going to be. We know what they have been in the past, and we expect some of them to rear their ugly head and come back to the forefront. But in 2017, we're going to wait and see what's filed, what starts moving to take our approach. We're going to judge each bill on a bill-by-bill basis. We have an advisory committee of businesses and individuals that sit on it to help us as a coalition decide. This is a very grassroots organization. But some of the companies that to date have joined the coalition, you have North Carolina Port Council, you have South Coast Distributing Company out of Goldsboro, Port City Community Church down in Wilmington, Farm Bureau, Mount Olive Pickle. But then you have our most recent member, which we're very excited about, the North Carolina League of Municipalities. So it's an interesting mix when the league and the people who pay for their health insurance, the city councilors, the mayors, the town managers, are seeing healthcare costs rise and forcing small and local budgets to reconsider what exactly they offer their employees. And so this issue does not just impact small businesses and individuals, it impacts town budgets and county budgets. And that's something that we're excited to have them on as a coalition member to help us advocate against these costly mandates. And so what is fiscal health? Well, when you create a new organization, you get to create your own definitions a lot of times. I got to do it when I was with Joe Stewart at the Free Enterprise Foundation. And so, again, I get to do it now. But it's North Carolina healthcare policy issues and as they affect the interrelated financial states of individuals, their businesses, and their communities. So what does that mean? Well, when money's coming out of your pocket, you're not spending it at your local hardware store. When you're paying for health insurance premiums as a small business owner, you're not making that next level investment into your company. Or as an employee, when those additional costs rise up, you're not being able to do things for your family. And so this is what we mean by fiscal health. Every mandate, every dollar spent on an additional mandate hurts the North Carolina economy. And this is a conversation that's important to have. I mean, again, I go back to the point, we talk about being one of the best tax climates in the entire U.S., talk about being one of the best regulatory climates in the U.S., why aren't we talking about the cost of health care in North Carolina as compared to the rest of the state or rest of the U.S.? I mean, President-elect Trump talked about crossing state lines. I mean, that's going to be an issue that's going to rise to the forefront if we're not getting ahead of it. And as a state that I love and cherish, and I think we all owe it to ourselves to continue to remind legislators that they work for the populace, this is an issue that is easy to understand in terms of economic sense. So we launched a cool website, as any good coalition does, North Carolina Coalition for Fiscal Health. We are putting blog posts and curated content up daily. So check it out, subscribe to our email. We will be sending you updates. Right now, all of our email includes just a Friday recap since there is no legislation that we are fighting against as of yet. But I do believe the honorables on Jones Street will give me something to get upset about in relatively short order when they come back into session in mid-January. But check out our website. A lot of our materials are on there. Join our conversation on Facebook. There's a very lively and exciting conversation happening there. It's been overwhelming to see the interactions of people across North Carolina that are participating in this conversation. And so this is an example of what an outside group fought mandates. This past year at the General Assembly, in case you missed it, everyone has heard of the opioid crisis in North Carolina. It's a very serious and tragic crisis that's not just impacting North Carolina, it's impacting the entire U.S., but it really hurts here in North Carolina, especially in Hickory and Wilmington, two of the most impacted towns in the entire U.S. Well, there was a group formed, funded by the pharmaceutical companies, a couple of which make the opioids, that wanted the North Carolina General Assembly to pass what's called ADF, formulated opioids, which that was a fancy name for abuse deterrent formulation opioids. Well, anybody with a computer or a cell phone that has the ability to type in youtube.com and type in how to beat a abuse deterrent formulated opioid to figure out how to break the code and to get your high is what it is. The pharmaceutical company said this prevented it, and they said because we're preventing that abuse, we're going to add a new price tag to it. But don't worry, your insurance company is going to take it. And so a group of companies and organizations came together to say, no, this isn't stopping the problem that has created the mess with opioids, and this additional price tag isn't going to stop it either. And so why should you force that only on the individuals and small businesses of North Carolina to solve this issue? And so this was a video that was aired in Eastern North Carolina to remind legislators that they're not solving the problem, they're only passing along the cost, and it's a growing problem of mandates in North Carolina.
There's an epidemic in America: prescription painkillers. These powerful drugs are easy to obtain, addictive, and dangerous. North Carolina is considering legislation making access to these addictive drugs easier. North Carolina already has too many health insurance mandates that increase health insurance premiums for everyone. Another mandate is not the solution to this deadly problem. Tell your representative to protect North Carolinians and stop government drug mandates.
So that's just one example. Last year there were about 10 to 12, depending on what you consider your definition of mandates. I consider about 12 of them. And so we expect to see at least that many, if not more, this upcoming session. And so the coalition's there to fight. Hope you will join the conversation, join our efforts, and am now happy to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
You failed to mention one thing, and that's the competition among insurance companies. Mandates keep insurance companies from coming in.
That's true.
They don't want to support the mandates. No words on that?
That's a. So what you're saying is because we have so many mandates on the book, a lot of insurance companies won't come in because of the cost of doing business here, and I think that's evidenced by the number of insurance companies that have left North Carolina, and a lot of the competition for those insurance dollars, but a lot of that was the ACA. We're talking about the individual market outside of the ACA to a large degree. It does impact that, but you're exactly right. It does stymie competition by insurance companies.
Before the ACA,
Yeah,
there were only
you're exactly right.
a limited number of companies
Willing to be here. Yep.
market insurance in North Carolina.
Yep. Yes, sir.
You mentioned fighting against new ones. Are you going to try to get some of the old ones scrapped?
There might be efforts underway to the same approach that regulatory reform happened in the General Assembly a couple years back, to sit down, look at them, see how many people are actually using them, see if there's a benefit, what's the cost from an economic standpoint. There might be some efforts underway to get a few members to dig into that. I think a few study committees might be something worthwhile there. And also, another interesting point is that I've tried to make: why are they only picking and choosing parts of the population? If these mandates are so good that they're excited about them, they think it's going to do a great number of good for North Carolinians, why are they only picking individuals and small business owners? Why doesn't it apply to state health plan? Why doesn't it apply to Medicaid, Medicare? Because the cost, the price tag. If the state's having to pay for these mandates, it goes through the roof, they can't afford it. But why do you think they just put it on the individuals? Because it's similar to a hidden tax, is what they're doing. So
when organizations or advocates say that there's something in particular, some additional mandate that they would like the legislature to approve, it's typically a very emotional argument. If my memory serves, I think there was one about autism in the last couple of years, and it's really hard for anyone to say, well, gee, no, I don't want to help an autistic child. So how will your organization deal with the fact that there is this natural human tendency to think, well, we should step out and we, the government, should help.
Yeah, and so that's the challenge I face as the executive director of this organization. But yes, that was a very emotional argument. But you know, if I am fortunate enough that I don't have a situation where that my family is impacted by autism, why should I be paying for that? Is the question. And so, you know, some people will probably describe me as a very bad person at the end of the day when I'm fighting their particular organization on those type of issues, but someone has to stand up for the people. I mean, if you travel around the state, and especially in rural North Carolina or in the mountains, you know, you think about if you're a farmer and Hurricane Matthew just hit your property and then you just got all the rate increases on top of that. I mean, your livelihood is at stake. And throwing an additional mandate on top of that just continues to increase your prices. And let's say you have 4 or 5 employees. You're not just paying for that one per month increase. You're paying for all 5 employees. And so it continues to add up. And someone has to take a stand for the economic side of this argument. And the reason this coalition is in existence is because no one was doing that previously. Although I will say, Catherine Restrepo has done a lot of great work for John Locke in raising the awareness and describing mandates in depth in some of her writings.
It seems that the word mandate was redefined.
Yeah, of course.
And we've allowed that. I would think the consumer
Mm-hmm.
and the insurer should have a menu to choose from. And I can't understand how a conservative General Assembly didn't do more to stop this free fall.
Yeah, it's mandates aren't exactly a partisan issue. You know, North Carolina State Senate, under the leadership of Senate Pro Tem Phil Berger, has been very good at stopping mandates. They've actually been the backstop for North Carolina for the past few years. The House is where we have a lot of issues. They continue to propose mandates, and some of these legislative proposals come from people higher up in leadership, and so which only makes the fight that much tougher. But since I used to help get them elected, I'm willing to fight them. Yes, sir.
To sort of follow up on the recent questions, Barry and Donna, this is about the propriety of any mandate. I think back in the olden days, the scenario was more the consumer would pick the policy that consumer thought they needed, to some extent being limited by what the insurance company was willing to offer. Perhaps there could be a little bit of negotiation, but maybe not that much. And that was it. Then the notion became prevalent that the state or the government should dictate what should be the minimum content of an insurance policy. And that probably has happened in every state, or almost every state for some reason, such that it was not up to the parties to the transaction. The state intervened. And this is not only limited to health insurance, it applies to automobile insurance, it probably applies within some limits to homeowners insurance. I don't know how much commercial insurance, liability insurance. But on the one hand, there's this more kind of laissez-faire position. On the other hand, there's the notion that the state does have some appropriate role to determine a minimum content of an insurance policy. And I wondered what your position is on where you fall in on that.
That's a very interesting question. What I'll say to that is, I do agree that insurance mandates aren't just prevalent in the health insurance. You know, what does the most free market, consumer-driven health insurance landscape look like? I mean, do we go through and say, I want to be covered for X, Y, and Z? You know, there's some thought out there around that. But at the end of the day, we can only fight within the constraints that we're given. ACA is the law of the land until something happens with that. And then once that is pulled out, how does that void get filled? You know, we only, like I said, we are staying singularly focused on the mandates coming up in North Carolina and how they impact and we're not going to be challenging insurance companies to defy the ACA and come up with their own product line, although reasonable minds think that could be a more free market approach. But we are literally just going to be focused on the mandates that are coming out of the GA and perhaps looking backwards of what have already passed. But I think what you're talking about is more revolutionary shift in the entire insurance landscape, and I am only one person.
Let me just follow up though.
Yeah,
it
of course.
seems like if you concede there should be some mandates, then it becomes difficult to argue about, well, this one is fine and this one is not.
I've conceded that there should be no mandates.
That would be your position.
That's my position
Okay.
as a person.
Okay.
Reasonable minds are going to argue what constitutes a mandate. I mean, defining a mandate, what I see as a mandate, the person 2 rows down might not see as a mandate. And so that's where the gray area is, what is defined as a mandate. And so the way we are approaching that as a coalition is we have an advisory committee of small business owners, individuals, an insurance broker who's very knowledgeable about it, and hopefully a town manager that we're working on to sit on an advisory committee. And once the legislation's filed, I'll go through and pull it, give them a summary overview, and they'll help me decide whether that's a mandate or not. So it's not just me, I'm relying on those small business owners and individuals that have some knowledge within the marketplace to help me decide. But yes, generally speaking, we are opposed to mandates.
Seems that we have a great comparison built into our system. Namely, you have these large employers, self-insured employers who don't come under these mandates. So when someone says, oh, autism, we need a mandate because X, Y, and Z, you point to the whole health, all the companies, universities who aren't subject to that mandate. Are there kids who have autism suffering dramatic? I mean, pick your mandate. We have this great system where we can make a comparison. Gee, are state employees doing terrible because they don't have this mandate? Go down the list. I don't know, it just seems a great comparison and always a sort of a fallback argument. Always.
Yep.
For every new mandate and every old mandate, by the way, because they don't come under. So we have a mandate-free system in the state to point to, right?
Yep.
We should just constantly point to it.
In fact, I think that's where when this ADF bill that the ad I showed last was moving through the House, I think that's where you got some Democrats heavily interested in the bill because it didn't impact state health plan. And they're like, well, if it's good enough to save people who are individuals or small business plans, why is it not good enough for the state health plan? And so, like I said, this is a bipartisan issue and a bipartisan problem. And so it's just fascinating because that is a good argument that we will probably rely on quite heavily in the coming months. And the reason why it's a great argument is if you put the price tag on these additional mandates onto the state to pay, you're going to have to pay higher taxes. And so that's when it becomes real. And, right now they're just making the insurance companies the bad people who have to raise premiums, and the state lawmakers are like, oh, okay, it's fine. The insurance companies are going to take the heat. But when they have to shift money around, because there's always limited resources, financially speaking, for a state budget, when you have to shift those resources around to cover higher state health plan costs because of new mandates that have been applied to it, it becomes a real argument that they're going to suffer with.
Do you know the percentage breakdown of the percentage of employees or people who are covered by plans that don't come under the mandate versus ones that...
Yeah, 1.5 to 4.5, so 1 out of every 3.
One out of which direction?
1 out of every 3 is impacted by mandates.
Okay, so 2/3 of our employees are not subject to these mandates, and they're not dying in the street.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
The question I have, though, certainly the state health plan has mandates. They cover
Certain things, yes.
So you can't say they don't have mandates.
They don't have all the mandates that you as an individual... Yes.
So,
But a lot of times these bills are so narrowly written that they only impact... There's not the inclusion of state health plans. There's not the inclusion of Medicare or not the inclusion of Medicaid. These are so narrowly written that they are only focusing on individuals and small plans that purchase their health insurance through an insurance provider. The way they are written, it says if you purchase your plan through an insurance provider must do X, Y, and Z. So that's how we say that.
yeah, but the state health plan must do certain X, Y, and Z.
Only if the board of the state health plan approves of those.
I still, as a physician, experienced with all of these plans, there wasn't that much difference in the plans across the board in terms of what I was paid and reimbursed for. So it's not like I saw, the state health plan was, as far as the physician's concerned, it is a great plan.
But not, we are paying for more than they are covering on the state level as an individual purchaser of insurance.
That's also kind of the point. Point is you don't need the mandates to get things that people want coverage. And so, yeah, it doesn't mean that it's proof that if you don't have the mandate, a lot of these things still get covered because that's what employees want, and big companies need to provide these things as part of their compensation plan to get good employees. So actually that's an argument, it seems to me, in your favor.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that, for instance, you mentioned chiropractic. That is an enormous lobby. The amount of money that each individual chiropractor in this state pays to his lobbyist is, say, 100-fold more than an individual physician pays for a lobby. But the state health plan covers chiropractic as do your mandate.
Yeah, so, but do they cover it as a specialist?
No.
That's the difference. They want to be covered as a specialist, and that's what we're fighting against, even on the local level. So even if it applied to state health plan, that's still going to drive up costs, and as a taxpayer, you should be unhappy about that as well. That the chiropractor wants to be paid the same as a specialist.
Well, everybody wants to be paid the same. The nurse assistant and
Yeah.
PA and your garbage man, probably.
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I don't know if you covered this in your talk, but you mentioned that there's certain committees looking at the cost-benefit factors and mandates. Do you know of any states or legislatures that have scaled back on the number of mandates?
That's a great question. I know a great resource is the National Conference of State Legislatures. I will do some digging and get back to you on that. I don't know of any off the top of my head, but that doesn't mean it's not happening.
Bob?
The chart that you had the cost of the different specialties.
Yes, sir.
This one, yeah, that one there. Do you also have the benefits that have been paid to these specialties?
Man, you are asking a tough question. Yes, I can probably get that figured out.
Be interested to see the difference.
Yeah. So how many claims fall within those mandates and see if it's, yeah. Yeah, that would be an interesting chart. That would take some time, I mean, some real actuarial research, but it'd probably be easier if we did it for 1 year instead of pulling it out to like the 30 years. I mean, some of these have been on the books for like 30 plus years, and so, but yeah, that would be interesting research, and I think that's a great idea. Thanks for sharing that.
From the same chart, I would say a mandate there should be something in common that each of them have with each other to make them a mandate. They have nothing in common. It looks like whatever the whim is to get something that we'll call a mandate.
Well, so maybe it would have been more helpful if I'd have put the years
I
in.
don't mean from your part. I
Yeah.
mean, when they sit down and say this is a mandate, that's a mandate, why?
Well, so what I was going to say is it might have been more helpful if I'd have put like the years in which they were passed to kind of give you a historical snapshot of like when certain things might have happened that spurred these individual mandates or something like he said. I mean, he hit the nail on the head about the chiropractic lobby being very well resourced to take these fights versus, I guess you were a member of the medical society at some juncture, which also has good resources, but probably not as strong as chiropractor because they're really fascinated on getting reimbursed the same as a doctor.
I think the chiropractors pay up to 20% of their income for their lobby.
Well, maybe I'm in the wrong business.
But it should be none of the chiropractor's business what insurance I have. It's like backwards.
So I'm here.
Good luck.
Yeah, we already been talking about the fact that often this is an argument, emotional case against the economic dollars and cents case. Are you not hearing from the folks who are pushing the mandates an economic argument saying, hey, if you mandate this, this is going to lead to cost savings in the future, and so you conservative General Assembly members should put this in because it's going to lead you to get some cost savings?
Yeah, so the opioid, they use that argument because, again, they wanted us to pay for these new crush-proof or, I guess, melt-proof opioids, but it was made by the same ones who had produced the initial opioids that got everyone hooked. And so what we argued was, well, reimbursing or paying for these new opioids isn't going to decrease the potency of once you get through the time release of the drug, A. B, we have a bunch of other issues that are happening on the national level, whether it's overprescribing, the pain management that a doctor is forced to deal with in order for patient ratings, etc. So why are we pushing this to force a certain segment? And their counter was, well, if we help a person get off of the addiction of opioids, then we're going to save a lot of money in long-term health care. And while that was a novel argument, research from the New England Journal of Medicine was showing that, okay, so perhaps they're no longer taking the opioids because of the abuse. 36% of people who were no longer taking those opioids were going to street heroin. And so their argument just kind of didn't hold up with empirical data from other studies about the issue. But yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, they try to push it out as a long-term health cost issue, but some quick research and reading sometimes can help you counter that pretty effectively.
Matt, can you show us one more time what your website is if folks want to check out what you're doing?
It is www.fiscalhealthnc.com. Maybe I should have actually put that on there. But fiscalhealthnc.com is our website. Yes, sir.
One more comment about the opioid issue, which is a great issue.
Yes, sir.
I think one of the best ways that is evolving to handle that is physicians are only allowed now, and this state has really come down strong about this, to write a prescription for X number, maybe 12 Oxycontin, instead of giving an open, because physicians don't want to keep seeing these patients. They drive you crazy. They've been in a legitimate accident and they don't get better, and then they get dependent. So now instead of giving an open end, say 100 of them, and then these people go sell it on the street and do all that, you can only write for 12. And just limiting the number, but of course what that does is drive these individuals to the street to buy heroin, which is dirt cheap. So it's an inexorable problem that has no solution.
Okay, Matt Bales, thank you.